Well, hello, good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Teachers Lounge Talk Show. It is our pleasure to be in your house 7 in the morning, because that's when we air. We are on 7 to 8 in the morning on Comcast Channel 90. That's WHPR TV 33, also known as the Mothership. We are so happy to be here today. Before I go any further, let me pump my brakes. We have got to thank Minister Malik Shabazz and the Get Up Stand Up Show for the count 'em 5 years we have been on his platform. He has been so gracious with us. WHPR TV and Watkins Broadcasting has been very gracious with us. This isn't free, but it's very reasonable. Like, one of those, I'm gonna make you an offer you can't refuse. So it's like, I can't pass that up. So we are grateful. We are grateful to even be in a time where teachers can have their own forum, their own showcase, where we can talk about teaching issues, when we can talk about educational trends that affect you, that affect your child, that affect your community. So we are very, very happy to be here. I'm going to ask our hosts to introduce themselves, please.
Hello, everyone. It's Candace Williams here with Irby Education, your favorite reading specialist.
How you doing, everybody? I'm Donovan Gardner, DPSCD employee, ESC teacher.
Good morning, everyone. I'm William Weir. I am a retired DPSCD teacher and am currently working with a social education justice group called 482 Forward. Glad to be here.
And I am Mrs. Piper. You're one of your hosts. Now, we're going to do something a little different here. Normally, we have our hosts introduce themselves, but we're going to do this a little differently. I'm going to stop my video. So right now, that's my protest picture that you're looking at. And I'm going to share my screen. And I am going to demonstrate for you a technique called a read aloud. A read aloud sounds just like what it is. It's a read aloud. And this is a strategy that our teachers do, not just DPSCD, but worldwide. So this is how I'm going to introduce our guest today. Mr. Hakim Crampton. Hakim Nathaniel Crampton is an award-winning poet, an author of 8 books, and a national juvenile justice, youth violence prevention specialist, and motivational speaker from Jackson, Michigan. He emerged as a prisoner rights advocate while serving a 45-year sentence for a 1991 wrongful arrest and conviction. 15 years later, Hakim won his freedom with the assistance of the Wisconsin Innocence Project. Since his release in 2006, he has been a leading advocate, a leading activist within schools and juvenile centers across Michigan, pushing to disrupt the school-to-prison pipeline and help youthful offenders successfully transition into adulthood after contact with the juvenile justice system. As a poet and motivational speaker, Hakim created a hip-hop-based English language arts pedagogy to engage Black students in reading and writing within a classroom setting. Hakim has received over a dozen awards for community service. As founding director of Amen for Youth, he works with youth and young adults by providing on-site academic mentoring and instruction through the highly innovative project SLAM. His greatest hope is to see a future where Black males are no longer at risk of complete societal segregation through incarceration and social discrimination. Ladies and gentlemen, when we return back, you will see Mr. Hakim Hampton. Where are you, Hakim? Where are you, Mr. Crampton? Where are you, Hakim?
I'm right here. I'm right
Hey,
here.
how was that intro? How was that intro?
It was wonderful. Good
That
morning.
was
Thank
wonderful,
you.
yeah. Well, we're so happy to have you here. And before we go any further, I have to admit, Hakeem was supposed to be here about, last year, right? And things just didn't work out. And this young brother was so kind to us because he could have easily been like, kick rocks. Y'all don't know what you're doing, But he was so positive. Every time I was like, look, we got to reschedule. He was like, absolutely, no problem. Just let me know. So, brother, I just want to just publicly thank you for that because I could have went left quick. So thank you, Hakim. Thank you for that. So, Hakim, I'm just going to dive into it. I am a teacher. And we read your bio, and we know that you spent some time in prison. Am I correct? So I want to take you back to when you were a little child, when I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So what type of student were you?
Yes. Those are great age groups right there, great grade levels, actually. In my early childhood days, I was a phenomenal student, very gifted, very talented, avid writer, an avid reader, was well liked by my teachers. And right around the age that you're currently teaching at, the 5th grade was the last year I had a very great, successful school year with a great teacher, Miss Patricia Anderson, God rest her soul. And in my 6th grade year, unfortunately, it was a tumultuous time. The mid 80s, the crack era, that's when things started to change for my generation. And I found myself arrested at school, right? In the 6th grade. And that's when things changed with how I was in school. My academics began to slowly decline in spite of my academic abilities.
Arrested for what? What were you arrested for in the 6th grade? What could you?
So on the recess yard, leaving from one area of the school to another, we used the recess yard. And I began throwing acorns. And as a little, child, the acorns weren't going that far. So I picked up a stone and I threw a stone, and that stone unfortunately hit my teacher. And they prosecuted me to the fullest extent of the law, charged me as a felon for assault, and locked me up.
I'm not supposed to ask this type of question, but I just have to sneak it in. Was it a white teacher?
Yes.
Sir, I apologize from one teacher to whatever that teacher did. I apologize. She should have handled it differently. So I'm sorry that you had to go through that. Just want to ask you one more follow-up question. I'm going to be honest with you, Hakim. To hear you say that you were a model student, I did not expect that because I had all kinds of follow-up questions. Because I'm thinking if you went to jail, you were probably a problem student and you probably matriculated yourself by your behavior into prison. But that's not the case. So you're saying that one incident transformed you. You couldn't be resilient and say, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to show them I can get A's and be the best student I can be to prove that you can be on the streets and in school and have a familiar environment.
Yeah, I think that I would have had that attitude had I had the support from the education system. Now, mind you, I was arrested for assault at a school. So now I transitioned from the 6th grade to the 7th grade, which from an elementary school to a middle grade to a middle school. And once I got to that middle school, I was rejected by the education institution for the behaviors that was exhibited the previous school year where I was arrested and sentenced to juvenile. So I was essentially not even given another chance by the next level of school, my middle grade schools, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. By the time I was in the 8th grade, I was already kicked out of public schools and sent to alternative schools. Now, mind you, we're talking 1984, 85, and 86, the crack, era of mid-Michigan. And here I was, a child without the kind of loving support I needed from the educational institution, and I was easy prey for the streets at that time. And so I became exactly what I had been pipelined to, right, to incarceration.
Candace?
Yes. Well, speaking of the whole school to prison pipeline, as someone who focuses on literacy and reading, I see that, as you may know, Hakeem, right, is that they look at the third grade reading test scores to dictate how many prison cells they're going to build. And what do you think about what do you think about all of that?
Well, unfortunately, I come to find out how accurate that actually is. Because once I was inside the education, or once I was inside the prison system, I got my education together. I followed back up, got my stuff together, and I became an academic tutor inside the prison system for about 12 years of the 15 years I was incarcerated. I was an academic aide or tutor. And what what I learned was that 75%, particularly of men that come to prison, came to prison as high school dropouts. Of those high school dropouts, these were the students who were testing at fourth, fifth, and sixth grade reading, writing, and math literacy levels. That correlated directly to those students who, when they were in the third grade, if their scores started falling short of third grade reading and math levels, these were the students who were then determined they were going to end up in prisons. And I seen the correlation. And so it made me very, very angry that we were in a position in life that became a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right, exactly. And this is why, as you know, with Michigan Read by Grade 3 law, they're really pushing for more early literacy programs for that intervention. And for myself, I'm a reading specialist. So my job is to catch the students before they end up in those spaces in third grade. But one of the things that I noticed, and maybe you can kind of let me know what was some of the stories that your, those people who you were tutoring and whatnot shared with you. But what was it like at home, like as far as getting support from their parents? Because this is one of the things that we notice is that we have to really support parents in the home before they end up in that third grade space. So what were their stories?
So the stories that I've seen and heard in prison were stories that I was familiar with myself and my own childhood upbringing. And what I had seen in prison from other people's similar stories of myself was that we were a generation of young Black males, particularly young Black males. We were what we used to call endangered species. We understood that we were classically endangered to a certain extent, right? Without protection. We didn't have the protection of the law to have declared us an endangered species and to say, hey, you're in danger, we're going to come in and support you. Instead, we recognized that endangered species told us that we were either going to be dead or in prison by the time we were 18 or 21 years old. So therefore, we felt a disconnect at home in the community. So therefore, we developed an I don't care an attitude, a disconnect from society. We became that underground class in society that everyone shunned and despised. So therefore, we found more support in the streets, more love in the streets than we did at home, in spite of some of us came from homes where mothers or fathers were trying to encourage us to do the right thing. But we're only in the home enough time to go to sleep at night and get that encouraging inspiration from mother or father. But we were out in school throughout the day. We were in our neighborhoods throughout the day. We were getting a different upbringing and a different connection. And we lost the connection with that family village upbringing.
Right. Yeah. And it's all about the village. Donnie, as you work with students with special needs, when I think about a lot of the correlation between our African American students who are labeled, right, and then you have that whole school to prison pipeline. You want to chime in on that?
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate that we have a school to prison pipeline, and it seems like it's just concentrated on one particular demographic. When you look at the condition of the schools or even the materials that's being used, it just seems like the disenfranchised or the melanated people get the dilapidated materials. They get overlooked. They don't get the fancy laptops that the private schools get or the public schools that are out in suburban districts get. And it just seems like there are allotted more opportunities as well. Like Brother Crampton was saying, when you only at home to get that love from your parents for only so many hours of the day. But where's the opportunities within the neighborhood? I'm an 80s baby. And then like 84, 85, I was probably on like 4 years old. but I see the difference, and I see how the neighborhoods start deteriorating. There used to be a boys and girls club that started deteriorating. There used to be rec centers that started deteriorating. They used to have shop classes and different avenues to incentivize the kids to say, hey, you finish high school, you can go straight into General Motors or straight into Ford or straight into Chrysler. They got rid of all the intangibles that we need to compete with other demographics. And I can only speak as a member of the Black community and what I see, and that's what I'm seeing, and that's what created that pipeline from prison. What is it?
School to prison pipeline.
School to prison pipeline.
Mm-hmm. You have a question for Hakim, Donnie?
Yeah, I do.
You look handsome, Donnie.
Oh, thank you.
I'm just loving. I'm loving the tie, the button up.
I only dress up when we have company.
I was just about to say how you haven't seen us when we don't have company, right? We're just like just chilling out.
You can tell we don't have company when we don't have company. I'll just put it like that.
All right, ask your questions so we keep it moving.
Okay, so I heard or read, in your bio that you were bragging about, maybe some of the things that you had done and may have dropped the F-bomb here or there. I don't give a F. You know how kids are these days. They had that I don't give a F mentality. What were you bragging about?
Yeah, I think that attitude epitomizes the general overall mental state and mental health of young Black males today. And for the last 4 decades, we reached a point to where we feel that we haven't received enough love from others in our life to where why should we care about ourselves? We felt that no one else cares. So what valid point have we discerned that we should care about ourselves enough? So I was one of those childs in my early adolescence years, 13, 14, 15, when I felt the most disconnect. I really felt that I didn't care. I didn't give a F. And I would routinely make those kinds of statements because they were validators for the problems that I was having, right? Mm-hmm. I felt that, no one else cared about me. So if I don't care, then it would demonstrate to others the strength that I have, because my heart is hardened. I don't care. So therefore, don't bother me. Don't confront me, because I have a hardened heart that doesn't care. And I'm disconnected from love and joy and happiness and support. And so that right there spells very serious danger for the mental health of a child, right? And so that's why I lay with that, unfortunately.
Well, you're obviously a very intelligent person, and as a teacher for 23 years, I would see that intelligence in kids. During the 80s, I had this idea I was going to change the world if I became a police officer in the city of Detroit. It was not a very good decision. But what I saw was that all of these brilliant kids, because they didn't have that love and support, then you would turn on the news, you would hear, just say no, get tough on crime. And rightfully so, during the crack period, a lot of people were afraid. And unfortunately, we bought into that. We bought into labeling our kids. We bought into the hype that was on TV, that I'm quite sure, you had 3 rocks of crack, maybe worth about $25. You could have $2,000 worth of cocaine and get off. 3 rocks of crack, you got a life sentence. So it was unbalanced. It was unfair. And another thing that I didn't like about those test scores, books are written at grade level and slightly above. Well, depending if you came from poverty or whatever, it didn't mean that you weren't intelligent. You just didn't have the same opportunities. So what happened is that kids were always behind. And instead of bringing them up, they labeled them. And I think we lost a lot of brilliant young Black people because of that. I mean, who wants to come to school and feel like they're a failure every day? So where did you get your love? Just like you said, out in the street. And the prison, the school to prison pipeline, unfortunately, we as educators and sometimes parents and elected officials, we helped build that pipeline, and that was very unfortunate. I'm quite sure you ran into a lot of brilliant people when you were incarcerated. They just did not get the chance. Would you like to expound on that a little bit?
Absolutely. You know, our prisons, unfortunately, are a haven of our brightest intellectuals. You know, and when you think about it, you think about our history in the past, all the way back, even biblical. The greatest
Mhm.
minds were always incarcerated. There was always a way to find some reason to incarcerate people. If you remember the Greeks' greatest philosopher, Socrates, he was detained and ultimately found guilty of a
Hmm.
crime and ultimately sentenced to death, right? And so what we find is that inside prisons, because of the culture and the climate in America, our most brightest minds of Black men and Black women, right, have their opportunities in life stifled, right? And with the pipeline to prison, you know, it don't start in school, but what happens is that when we talk about the breakdown in our communities that has been long-standing post-slavery, our children are then set up for failure because, and our school systems are set up for failure because our kids come into the schools ill-equipped and ill-prepared from broken social structures, and then our education systems aren't even equipped oftentimes to provide a layer of wraparound support services while children are in the school system because they're defunded. We've defunded our schools. You know, talk today, social justice advocates, we're talking about defunding, you know, law enforcement. Our schools have been defunded, right? So we need to find a
Absolutely.
way to talk about bringing funds back to our schools where we can have the kind of support that children need. So if a child does come from home, from a broken structure and comes with some trauma, when they get to school, perhaps instead of getting the education right then and there, perhaps you as a teacher can reroute them for that moment to the case manager or social worker or therapist there who can give them the kind of support they need to be able to rejoin that classroom later today or later in the week, right? But because that's missing, our children are forced to go to school day in and day out, ill-prepared and ill-equipped to be there. And then those teachers are ill-equipped and prepared to really deal with that behavior, which is really symptoms and signs of trauma that our children are displaying. And so those teachers quickly unable to respond to that, say, get out of the classroom, go to the office, you're suspended. We got those SNAP suspensions and things of that nature. Now our children are out of school, you know, every week, 1-2 days, or every month, 2 or 3 days. Next thing you know, by the time they're in the 12th grade, if they make it to the 12th grade, they've missed 200 or 300 days, course years in their school history, right? And those days compile, leave them academically, you know, not testing proficiency, right, for reading and math and et cetera. So we have to address that head on, and how we're going to rebuild the kind of wraparound support services for our children at the school to head off that pipeline to prison.
Can I talk with you, Hakeem, please? Listening to you, I just want you to know that in DPSCD, we started this program called Restorative Circles. Are you familiar with that? Okay. Um, and I participated, I had to participate in Restorative Circles. And I will tell you, I felt very uncomfortable about it because the first time we did the Restorative Circles, you know, one of my kids really opened up and tears were everywhere. And I'm like, okay, what do I do now? Okay, I let my counselor know, okay, we had a breakdown. I'm sending them to you. But then I don't mean to be selfish, but I was crying too, you know? So it's like, okay, how do I pull it together so that I can do my job and all of that? So what is your opinion about restorative circles? Do they work?
Great. Actually, I am a trained restorative justice facilitator. And the beauty about restorative justice is that the concept of it is a village concept, right? It comes from the Aborigines in Australia, the concept, the model that we use today in restorative justice, both conferencing and circling and peace circling. But the beauty of it is that it allows for communication, right? That's key. We know that in the Black community, one of the greatest struggles we have is to be able to effectively adequately communicate with each other. That's one of the breakdowns in our family problems, our family dynamics. We're unable to talk to our children effectively, adequately, wholesomely, in a healing manner, right? And likewise, our children are unable to talk to us. Restorative justice brings that into the conversation, into the atmosphere of youth adolescence, right? We're talking about youth who are growing and learning. So we really should be adding to that a learning process when we talk about discipline, right? There should be learning involved. There's nothing that we're teaching our children by saying that we don't like your behavior, go home for 3 days because you violated the rule, or go home for 10 days because you violated the rule. There's nothing they're learning from that, right? But in the restorative justice, we actually pull all parties involved, whether it was a teacher in the classroom that a student disrupted, or whether it was a hall room and other people involved in the classroom or the parking lot, or the school bus. We're going to bring those parties involved and have a conversation about how what happened impacted everyone and how it potentially disrupted the learning process, or how it could have affected your own personal growth, and how, for example, if there was something criminal involved, how there could be potentially criminal charges that could lead to someone, this youth, being in the juvenile justice system. If you bring that type of atmosphere in the education system to seek to restore justice by ultimately asking in the end, how do we resolve this in a way that meets both everyone's objectives? Meaning you, if you're the student that's been accused of something, you, if you're the teacher that's been obstructed by something in the classroom from this student, or if you're someone else or the other school districtors in the community, everyone comes together, has a communication, and resolves and agrees on a resolution. That to me is an education piece. That's an academic component. So therefore, to me, it belongs in the education process.
Right.
Hakim, I gotta push back on him. Hakim, that's the way it's supposed to go, right? Come around and you sit together and you identify the problem, and you make goals, and everybody's on board with the goals. That's how it's supposed to go. And allow me to say this, when restorative circles was introduced to me, I'm going back to maybe 2016, 2017, we received maybe 4 hours of professional development, okay? I remember it was a very nice man that did the training, and we all sat in a circle, and we had the ball, and we said our name, and we passed the ball, and we were participating. And then they gave us a book, a big old thick book that we were supposed to read. And after 4 hours of training and that big old thick book that we were supposed to read, we were supposed to go in there and handle restorative circles. And I was ill-equipped. I did the best I could. I did what I could. And honestly, I did the best I could with what I had, which was my 4 hours and my big book, right? So can you please explain, should teachers who feel uncomfortable with restorative circles be required, the operative word is required, should we be required to do it, especially if we're like, I've got 4 hours, I'm not going in there? I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, the training that it takes to be a facilitator is well over 20 hours, right? Especially from the International Institute, you have to get at least 20 hours at minimum to be able to adequately facilitate, because it takes time to understand the process. But in terms of teachers being required to get this kind of education or learning to be able to practice this, I don't think that all teachers should get the training to be facilitators, so to speak. All teachers should definitely receive the type of professional development that equips them to understand that schools now, by law, by the new ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, are required to consider an alternative to suspension, right? And what is recommended and advocated is restorative justice, right? And so if that is one of the recommendations, then I think that the schools, the education, the school district itself should require that somebody within its district, or they hire someone to actually be trained and equipped to actually conduct restorative justice conferencing, circles, et cetera, so that the schools should have access to that opportunity. And I think the ESSA Act is way better that we had. What I did, I used to work for the Student Advocacy Center of Michigan out of Washtenaw County. And our students actually participated in being consultants to the MDE, to the Michigan Department of Education. Once they were developing ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, our students actually went and participated for hours and hours, over months and months, from multiple chapters, from our Jackson chapter and our Ypsilanti chapter. And they got a chance to help kind of craft that ESSA Act, right? And so that we wanted to make sure that alternatives to suspensions were included in that as the priority, but the recommendation would be that restorative justice will become a part of the education process.
Right.
You know, as when we took, oh, I'm sorry, Candace, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, William.
You know, I think a lot of time is wasted in the School of Education when we take these classes that really don't help. I mean, and it's like the restorative practice was set up to fail, because to Sister Piper's point, we might be trained in restorative practice, but we have 35 other students. We don't have that much time in the day. What teachers should be trained in is identifying trauma. They should be trained in the effects of poverty that on students, you know. And instead of giving us, like she said, a crash course in restorative practice, they should have more people like yourself, more counselors. These kids, I hate to see kids, especially in elementary school, labeled bad, but we don't know anything about their background. And that's what starts the school to prison pipeline, because you have a restorative justice and you talk about it for 2 or 3 minutes. Kids aren't stupid. They know if you don't care. They know if you're just doing something perfunctory. So what happens? They don't talk. They don't express themselves. I think sometimes we made the schools sort of unwelcoming for parents. Mm-hmm. So until we, like you said, those wraparound services that make parents more comfortable in our school, and the necessary wraparound services that these kids need. The restorative justice training that we got, I think we got pimped, and somebody came in, they made a lot of money off of books. They made a lot of money off of people coming in there talking to us. And then they took off, and they got paid, and the restorative justice just went to heck.
I've seen it over and over and over. And see, that's the reason why the work that I do as an activist, an advocate, an education advocate, right? You know, I get down into the trenches. So I'm in the schools doing the work, right? And that's the key to me, is that our education system today has gotten so far away from opening the doors to the kind of support that is needed in our children's life. We put up so many barriers and so many blockades to block people from coming in and helping us. Why would we block community-based organizations from coming in offering their services to support our children, right? And that's what's missing. Like I talked about, those wraparound services, all those various social services that are out in the community, they need to be in our education halls, in our education systems. If we have defunded our schools so we can't afford social workers, then what are our social workers doing with the office down the street around the corner? Move that office into our schools, because that's who your clients are, right? That's where you need to be. And so we need to figure out, how do we challenge these systems, these educational systems that we know were designed to disempower Black people, right? So we can reinsert our voice back at the administrative table, where we're controlling the incomes and outcomes of our education processes for our children.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to get into the curriculum that you built in order to make it more authentic, right? These experiences that we're talking about, it's also due to the fact that children cannot relate to what is being taught in the schools. Leslie, how are we looking on time? Because I know we had the other couple segments.
Yeah, we have 9 minutes.
Okay.
Well, we probably need to start wrapping up in about 5.
Okay.
Maybe 4.
All right. So, which is why we're going to need you to come back on. Because there's so much more to cover as far as your curriculum that you have, to talk about a little bit more about the trauma and what teachers can do, like building relationships and things like that. So I guess we're going to go ahead and run into Donnie. Donnie, before I get my reading tip started, do you want to go ahead and let us know what is the current event, what is going on out there, and society.
Well, I guess my current event lesson of the day will be kids stay off drugs. Your
Wow.
education, stay in school, and stay off drugs. I'm getting ready to share my screen with you.
I don't think you're going to be able to. You're not going to have the capability.
Oh, okay. Well, that's okay because I'll just read. Okay, so two men dubbed Florida's dumbest criminals after one drops ID at crime scene. And I wish I could share my picture so all my viewers could see that these guys, these two gentlemen, you can tell that they're high on something. I don't know if it's meth, crack, heroin, it's something. But it says these two men have earned the dubious distinction of being named Florida's dumbest thieves of the week. Robert Hobby, 41, and Marcus Reeves, 23, are clearly not the sharpest tools in the shed, making a cinch for cops to track them down by leaving a few items behind after their alleged crime spree. Now, being a thief already makes you dumb, but that isn't why they are this week's dumbest criminals. The Marion County Sheriff's Office said on its Facebook page, you see, these two went on a burglary spree inside the city limits of Ocala and out here in the county. It said they were breaking into convenience stores, stealing cigarettes and lottery tickets. But while doing this, they were smoking cigarettes inside the store while the cameras were watching. The sheriff's office continued. But that still isn't the best part, because we didn't need the cameras to identify them. You see, when they left the store, they left their shoe, their tools, and Marcus left his wallet with his driver's license. So pause right there. You're robbing a convenience store. You have to be so high that you leave the tools you used to broke in the store and left this shoe. This is just clearly a case of kids stay in school, don't do drugs, because you might end up just like these two knuckleheads from Florida. Don't be like Robert and Marcus. And that's all I got for this week's dunce of the week.
Donnie, that's like one of those after school specials, right?
Candace, can I ask you a big favor? Can we hold off on your reading tip, please?
Sure.
I'm really looking at the time. And I want to thank Hakim. I want to close. And if it's okay, Hakim, because I don't have permission, I would like to close with one of your videos that are on YouTube, if that's okay. I'm going to take his silence to mean, yeah, you can do that, sister. So listen, people, it was great being here. It was great just having you with us. Our next show is going to be this Sunday, right, Candace? Right, Donnie? Right, Will? And that's our behind the scenes show. And we are very excited that we are going to be planning for Dr. Nikolai Vidi's visit, which is going to be the following week. So we're very excited. And you're going to see us dressed down and all of that. So, but listen, Hakim, he probably stepped away, but thank you so much. We are going to get you back here because we never even covered half the questions. I mean, we had 11 questions and we only got to 3. So thank you so much, Hakim. We're about to close. And as we close, I'm going to turn my camera off. And we are going to listen to Brother Hakim and his wonderful video. God bless you. We'll see you next week, people.
Spoken flow, poetry. 2 Apocalypse now. Wasted in my mind, trapped in time, searching for my life. I lived it on the line. Daily prayers like bread, I keep my heart cool. Used to slang rock, my mama called me fool. Now I live my life through spoken word, ooh. Play it in your soul like a needle to a groove. My failures speak volumes, my sins drenched too. Now I'm bending knee, praying like a Jew. Looking in the mirror, for only God knew. Capital sin, that's all my hands do. Now I trace my journey, my wings never grew. Lost in time, that's all I ever knew. Political disparities, social hysteria, cultural stagnation. America wouldn't marry me, her belly wouldn't carry me. Aborted at birth, black skin worth, biblical verse, Cain and Abel curse, neo soul verse, lyrical verse, never need to curse. Writing from my heart, we all play a part. Slave lessons learned, it's time to play a part. Lyrical gifts, I write them like a book. Page and pen in hand, the movements like a rook. Checkmate, guesstimate, stagnate, fluctuate. Hidden tragedies remind me of my namesake. Spellbound through poetry, now it's time to show it's me. Spoken flow poetry, spellbound through poetry. Spoken flow poetry, now it's time to show it's me. Spellbound through poetry, spoken flow poetry.
That was Mr. Hakim Crampton. Thank you so much. And we will see you next week here on the Teachers Lounge Talk Show. So long.